Thank you very much. I call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. I am Councillor Ian Edwards. I am the Leader of the Council and I'm Chairman of Cabinet. Welcome to anybody who may be following us on our YouTube channel. There being no members of the public present, I will move straight on to normal business, other than to remind colleagues to have their mobile phones turned off or to silent, please. Item 1, please. Apologies for absent, Mark.
All Cabinet members are present, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any additional declarations this evening, colleagues? None. Approve the meetings of the last meeting. That's page 116 in your pack. Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And this is to confirm that there are items in both Part 1 and Part 2, members of the public. Part 1 are the general papers that are discussed in detail. Part 2 are the private matters where it is not in the public interest for the discussion to be broadcast. We will be breaking the YouTube link between Part 1 and Part 2. So we'll turn to the Part 1 reports. Item number 5, the monthly Council Budget Monitoring Report for month 7. Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Leader. This is the report for results for the year to date as it stood at the 31st of October 2021. The overall financial position of the Council continues to be one of considerable financial strength and stability. So the General Fund Revenue account shows a positive variance against budget of £419,000, which is an improvement of £39,000 on the position at month 6. Month 7 would have yielded a much stronger result, but for an increased business rates liability of £399,000, which arose on the Battle of Britain Bunker and Visitor Centre. General balances continue to be projected at £26.5 million, which is consistent with earlier months. Our exceptional pressures arising from COVID-19 for 21-22 remain at £18.7 million, and as reported in previous months, this is covered by agreed central government funding and indeed £10.1 million of earmarked reserves, of which £8.6 million remains available to us. Turning to our programme of savings for 21-22, we're making good progress. Of the £10.4 million worth of savings budgeted for the year, £8.2 million are banked or are well progressed for delivery by the year end. A further £1.3 million is in early stages of delivery. The position on the dedicated schools grant remains unchanged, with a deficit of £12.7 million projected for the year, giving rise to a cumulative deficit of £38 million by the 31st of March 2022. We're making encouraging progress in discussions with the Department for Education, which is expected to lead to a programme of repayments to the Council, which should rectify the deficit. Turning to the housing revenue account, we continue to report close adherence to budget, with a forecast surplus of £91,000. I therefore move recommendation 1 on page A of the report, set out on page 18. And turning to part B of the report, on page 40 of the pack, this sets out recommendations A to J, which have financial consequences and are fully explained. But in particular, I do wish to draw Cabinet's attention to recommendation C, which is the rephasing of major capital projects from 21-22 into later financial years in the General Fund and in the Housing Revenue account of 27.4 million and 22.6 million respectively. I so move. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goddard. It is good to see that we are still in an exceptionally strong position financially, and thank you to you and the finance team for it. We're now moving into a very uncertain position. We've heard inflation rate being at an unusually high level. We see interest rates have been increased today, and we have the continued threat of COVID, whereas the government funding is coming to an end. It's therefore right that we continue with our exceedingly prudent approach, and I do not envy you and your officers' responsibilities at this time, trying to steer our way through this level of uncertainty. Colleagues, are the recommendation agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 6, the Council's Budget Medium-Term Financial Forecast 2022-23 through to 26-27. Councillor Goddard.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to start by just reminding members that this is indeed a consultation budget. So the consequence of that is that this is a budget in draft that we submit for consideration by select committees and indeed our residents, with a view to finalisation of the position as at our February full council meeting. A couple of points of emphasis here in terms of the way in which this has been put together. First of all, this is very much a 5-year strategy, and so that means that some of the planning and the consideration of savings programs, for example, are somewhat more strategic perhaps than they have been in the past. The effect is that I think we have a much more reliable read in terms of some of our later years within this forecast period. Excuse me. In addition, I do hope that members will find the report and the appendices somewhat more transparent and clear, which will help to enhance an understanding of what is going on with this budget. If we take a look at the budget itself, we have achieved a balanced budget for 22-23, and this is achieved through a combination of efficiency savings, through manageable increases, and I would emphasise the phrase manageable, in terms of our council tax, with a 1.8% increase in the headline rate of council tax, together with a 1% increase to the social care precept. So that increase is substantially less, I would say, than the current rate of inflation. What it equates to, if you look at a Band D house, this is something of the order of 67 pence per week. So very much, I would hope, a manageable increase as far as our residents are concerned. As far as fees and charges are concerned, they are very much tracking the rate of inflation. And a very important principle here, we're also looking to maintain our general balances at existing 21-22 levels. The budget is very much based on our existing sound foundations. And if you refer back to what I was saying about the monitoring position, the latest position that we have, we do have a favourable variance of over £400,000 for the current financial year, and we have uncommitted general balances of £26.5 million. I've already reported that 79% of our £10.4 million savings programme is banked or is on track for delivery. And it is expected that we will deliver all of the 21-22 savings in due course. However, I think it's important that we recognise the substantial growth that is taking place within our cost base. So we will see our cost base for service expenditure increase by something net, in net terms, of over £30 million to £270 million between 2021, 22 and 26, 27. And this is driven very much by a combination of inflation and demand-led pressures, and also the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And if we look at those influences, together with our capital investment plans, this would actually require a £66 million uplift in service expenditure. However, what we have been able to achieve are savings of £29.5 million, which have been developed, enabling us to deliver a balanced budget for 22-23, and leaving what I would describe as a comparatively tiny residual budget gap for the later years of £4.7 million in aggregate across the remaining 4 years of the MTFF period. Over the last 3 financial years, a significant factor affecting our financial performance has been the ongoing impact of COVID-19. And indeed, we have sustained financial cost pressures and income pressures which are in excess of £52 million. These extraordinary costs have been financed from central government grants to date, but it isn't expected that further funding will be forthcoming into 22-23 and beyond. And so this budget recognises that these cost pressures need to be met from our own resources, and hence this is a contributory factor to the still relatively small overall budget gap up to 26-27. Notwithstanding the additional challenge presented by the pandemic, this budget strategy does not rely upon the use of general balances to support service expenditure, and therefore maintains these at 26.5 million over a 5-year MTFF period. And I think this is important because the reality with reserves, with general balances, is you can only use them once, and once you use them, they're gone. Okay. A review that we've carried out of the range of general risks affecting this council indicates that the recommended level of uncommitted reserves should continue to be held between 15 million and 32 million pounds. And so we're sitting right within the appropriate range here. In addition to general balances, the council does hold earmarked reserves, but these are specifically allocated for particular risks, projects and cyclical expenditure commitments. As of 31st of March 2022, the earmarked reserves are projected to be 30.2 million, with 11.1 million of this sum held to manage COVID-19 costs. Our budget strategy here indicates a usage of 10.1 million of those earmarked reserves, which will leave us with 20.1 million of earmarked reserves on the balance sheet going forwards. Turning to our capital expenditure, this draft budget outlines 312 million of proposed capital expenditure in the years 22-23 to 26-27, and they include substantial investment in local infrastructure, a new leisure centre, progress towards reducing our carbon footprint, and the delivery of significant additional special educational needs capacity within the borough's schools. But I think the important thing to appreciate about this is that only 121.7 million of this will be financed through increased borrowing. The peak borrowing requirement of 270 million arising on the council comes in 25-26. It reduces thereafter and is entirely affordable. Turning to the housing revenue accounts, again, the headlines here are all about investment, and in this case, it's all about investment in our council house estate. So we are projecting the building of 500 new homes over the 5-year term, the regeneration of 2 key developments within the Hayes Town Centre, and a 5-year cycle of improvements to existing stock. In total, that amounts to capital expenditure of £450 million over the next 5 years, but yet again with only 213 million of this financed from increased borrowing, which again is entirely affordable. Fellow colleagues and cabinet members, this is a forward-looking budget with realistic expectations and a strong focus on enhancing our infrastructure and our environment, whilst at the same time maintaining prudent, strong financial controls and disciplines. I therefore commend this budget and the MTFF to the Cabinet, and furthermore, I refer you to the recommendations on page 2 of Pack B, items 1 to 6, and I so move. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gollard. Councillor Lavery?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Goddard, for that presentation of what is a very strong draft budget underpinned by our usual sound financial management. Within my portfolio, I would like to just comment on a number of the growth and business as usual items. In particular, the funding that has been set aside in this draft budget of £25 million or £5 million a year for climate change initiatives, which will enable us to invest in our schools, our buildings, in retrofitting, electric vehicles for our fleets, which underlines the commitment that the Council made to its climate change strategy earlier in the year. Turning to my housing portfolio, the continued commitment to the Hayes regeneration project and subsequent housing projects is very welcomed, as is the net increase in council properties of 100 a year or 500 over the term of the plan. And I say net because that is a net figure that we're aiming to grow the portfolio by, having taken account of matters like right to buy. So that is to be very welcomed, as is the substantial investment in upgrading our current council house stock, which will also help our climate emergency because some of the measures will improve energy efficiency. In terms of other areas, we remain committed to our weekly waste service and free garden waste, and we will increase our food waste rollout across this period. Not to leave out my green spaces colleagues, we have strong aspirations in terms of tree planting, which will be funded as part of this MTFF, and also to increase the number of wildflower areas both in our verges and parks, and we would aim by the end of the next financial year to have 56 verges and 28 parks with wildflower areas. So the draft does provide us with some very tangible achievements going forward, and I hope that it can then be reflected in the final budget when it comes forward in February.
Thank you, Councillor Lavey. Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Leader. What Councillor Goddard set out was a practical demonstration of what sound financial management of this authority is all about, in terms of allowing us to have the opportunity to continue to make sure that our residents' services are put first, that they receive what they expect from their local authority, and that they receive it in a quality and timely fashion. It also, as Councillor Lavey has indicated in one or two areas, gives us the opportunity to make further investment where residents consider it appropriate and where we see the opportunity to make sure that the full benefits of living in the London Borough of Hillingdon are enhanced for all our residents, whether they be in Harefield or all the way down to Heathrow villages. But I also would like to draw members' attention, which I'm sure they've read in detail, on page 15 of this report, examples of some of the savings that we are proposing, which I think really is a very good example of the way in which we go about doing things. Rather than looking to try to make savings by reducing number of people at the sharp end and therefore the services that our residents receive, we do a lot of the opposite and start at the top end. And therefore, as in terms of Roman numeral 8 on page 15 of paragraph 42, the review of the council's senior management, which is taking place, will enable us not only to make significant savings, which will be much easier to achieve than having to get rid of X number of personnel further down the line, but it will also enable us to strategically place this authority in a way which enables us to take advantages that are coming, but also deal with most of the challenges and uncertainties that face local authorities, which have been multiplied and remain multiplied by where we are in the pandemic curve at the moment and where the future lies. But also the decision that we took a number of years ago, which will come to fruition next May, to reduce the number of elected councillors from 65 to 53. The removal of 12 elected officials means that we can be more efficient in the administration of this authority, but also save nearly up to £250,000 to £300,000 in the cost of supporting that kind of membership, which has now proved to be not necessary as we move forward as an enabling authority and one that is willing to put our residents first and continue to be financially sound.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mills. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Leader. I echo what my colleagues have said already. This is a very sound and very able medium-term financial forecast. It has about it a circular synergy in terms of our green aspirations, in terms of all the aspects of our green aspirations that have been set out in the past. But certainly as far as my portfolio is concerned, public safety and transport, it responds to new challenges and to the way in which things are developing. The commitment to continue our financial support for shopping parades across the borough, to help business in that way, alongside investment and vital investment in our roads and travel network, which is something very forward-facing and something that the residents of this borough have become used to a very high standard of, and that is to be greatly welcomed. On the public safety side, again, there is a synergy between the way in which various aspects of this financial report deal with green travel and safer ways of dealing with things, but in particular a commitment to renew and replace the council's CCTV network, which will play a very important part going forward in our commitment to public safety. So this is certainly from my portfolio's point of view, and if I may say so, from everyone's portfolio point of view, an excellent financial forecast, and I support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Leader. Well, Councillor Goddard's done a good job. I'd go so far as to say this is a good news story, to pull a phrase from the past, and clearly it will be refined to some degree, as he's already mentioned, between now and February, certainly on the outcome of the scrutiny that it will no doubt receive in the interim period, and clearly also when we have better information coming through from central government, and no doubt information coming from the Mayor of London, whose precept we don't yet know. Now, being a Labour London Mayor is not usually a recipe for sound economy. It's usually a recipe for profligacy and poor spending decisions. So we've little doubt that he will look for a swinging an increase as he thinks he can get away with, especially as it's not an election year for him. Nonetheless, what we've done this year and what we hope to achieve when this budget goes through in February is a sound position for this borough and for the residents thereof, and certainly from my aspect, where we're looking at a lot of the capital projects that this council will undertake. Councillor Labour has already touched on one of the most significant, which of course is the regeneration of housing that we're undertaking down in the Hayes area, which over the next 5 years will involve significant investment, but which will kick off this coming spring. But in addition to things like that, of course, one of the biggest things we are going to see is the starting of work on the long-awaited Useley Leisure Pool. This is a £35 million investment, which we will be making over the next 2 to 3 years, starting immediately after Christmas. So this is a good news story. It's going to be a great new facility for the people of the south of the borough to enjoy, along with the existing leisure facilities we already have. And beyond that, we're investing financing in a wide range of facilities, including our outdoor water sports facility, the replacement for HOAC, which we hope will be forthcoming next year, or at least the start of it will come next year, right through to the other extreme, where we will be investing money in a location for our ex-residents in the Uxbridge Mortuary extension, which is one of the sort of lesser-known buildings that we look after and services we provide, where the building in question has been in need and is in need of significant refurbishment, and we will be spending money to bring that up to the latest date. Beyond that, we are involved with the Hillingdon First Property Company, which has been going now for some 2 or 3 years, and will over the next 5-year period, MTFF period, produce further profits that will filter through into the council's coffers. So there's a lot going forward that will benefit this borough, and I think we've got a good starting point here that we will conclude in February. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Leader. To address future demand around education and families, the Children's Social Care have developed a new pre-statutory support approach called the Stronger Families. This enables children and families to have support long before thresholds are met, aiming to build family resilience and self-support, including a new family hub. This will roll out to our children's centres to create environments where different professions can engage with families under one roof and better coordinate support for early years. children and families. As Councillor Mills has already mentioned, this is listed on page 15.7 through the Stronger Families support, and in addition to that, at the end of that paragraph, in relation to SEND and schools, the Council is working on a comprehensive programme of work to improve the offer to children in school settings and to improve the availability of specialist school places in the borough when they are required. As well as this, the Council continues with its £270 million school building and expansion programme to ensure that our schools have sufficient primary or secondary places for Hillingdon children. The continuation of adult learning, which during the pandemic lockdown were offered online lessons. The service now moves forward with a blended approach to delivering learning experiences. My portfolio also covers a range of residence activities for young and old. Here are but a few. So to support health and well-being, Hillingdon is an advocate of exercise. Our young people take part in the London Youth Games, and for families and young people, we have cycling programmes, football, walking football, women and girls activities, swimming sessions, as well as youth disability multi-sport sessions. These will continue into next year. The Tashan Daniel Award, Bursary, was launched in 2020 to support young residents to achieve their ambitions in sport, culture and education. And we have just announced the second year of awards and look forward to this continuing in future as well. The Council, just as a reminder, installed a plaque at Hillingdon Athletic Stadium to honour Tashan Daniels earlier this year. We will continue to run free activities for the 65 and overs, for example, the free coffee mornings for residents living with dementia and their carers. They take place across our libraries. We have healthy walks, dance sessions, swimming and seated exercises for our older people, as well as the activities and events and books that our libraries hold for older residents. We are using the blended approach with this area too. We have a new libraries app, and residents during lockdown were able to do click and collect and access other popular digital library books. The Battle of Britain Museum has had a fabulous new soundscape display in the bunker itself. Highly recommended, I would say, if you're thinking about visiting it. And an exhibition commemorating the Polish Air Force. The auditorium space this year was recently used by Hillingdon Philharmonic for the VE 80th anniversary concert. We make good use of our spaces and will continue to make our venues work hard for our residents. I support this draft budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goddard, thank you for pulling together. Oh, sorry. You wish to speak, Councillor Palmer. I didn't see you indicate.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to thank Councillor Goddard and the financial officers for this strong draft budget which enables social care to continue at the high level that I would expect as Cabinet Member and our residents have a right to expect. I do not think anyone would be surprised to hear that social care has had significant increases in demand resulting from the impact of the pandemic and the reduction of other support services for residents during the lockdown restriction period. I'm pleased to report that social care services have met this demand whilst also looking at new and innovative ways of supporting our residents. To give an example, Children's Social Care have re-provided improved semi-independent accommodation for young care leavers. Adult Services are working with our NHS colleagues to develop enhanced services for residents with mental health concerns. A crisis cafe where people are struggling can seek support and guidance has already opened its doors, and further work to develop community mental health step-down and crisis units is well advanced. Social care will continue to be proactive to offer suitable services by smarter working to improve our services. We are long-term planning which will save money in the long term and hopefully keep people out of social care. I welcome this draft budget, as I said, which will enable us to continue to do the excellent work we are doing now. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, this draft budget has written through it Hillingdon Conservatives. It speaks around low taxation, it speaks around sound financial management, prudence, strong reserves, it speaks around efficiencies, making our residents' council tax pound go that much further, and above all, it does all of this to provide high quality services and facilities that our residents expect. This for me is very much a strong MTFF. I'm very grateful for you putting it together in the way that you have done with the support of your team, and I very much invite residents' feedback on the makeup of this budget. Colleagues, the recommendations 1 to 6 agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Turning now to agenda item 7, the grants to Hillingdon's local voluntary organisations 2022-2023. Councillor Mills.
Thank you, Leader. I move the recommendations on page 46, which in total come to in excess of 2.3 million of our money going out to various organisations, either at the local level or via the London Council's scheme, which we continue to participate in. This remains a very generous contribution, one of the most generous throughout London, and rightly so. But it's fair to say, of course, that with the pandemic, the ability of many of our voluntary groups to operate has had to change and has been changed simply by what has been happening to them and around them. There are a number where the demand has greatly increased, and we have had lots of discussions with those and have tried to support them, and that's why there are a number, as set out in the paper, of local groups where we are actually increasing the amount of grant that we have given compared to previous years to try and reflect the increased demand and workload that is falling upon them. There are other groups where it is still not entirely clear exactly where they will end up when the pandemic comes to some kind of conclusion as to how they are best to go forward. But we remain committed to want to support those that are able to add value to the residents in our borough, and in particular to those voluntary groups that can show that they have modified and rethought their own operating model in the light of the changes that society is going through with the pandemic, and ones which are able to utilise our support in particular to leverage in additional money from other third parties to ensure that there is a real pound for pound gain on what they are able to offer to Hillingdon as a whole. So we are sort of at a crossroads year. At least one would hope that we're at a crossroads year in terms of where we are with the voluntary sector groups, and these recommendations will give them the opportunity to continue to adjust and to make the changes. But it is inevitable, I think, that the next year will show those that are able to rise to the challenge if they haven't already done so, and those that need to have a rethink about the strategic direction and the way in which they wish to operate in order to continue to get value for money for residents of Hillingdon and support from this local authority. I move the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mills. I welcome this report. I welcome the continued support of our local voluntary organisations, and I recognise that this is being done at a time of uncertainty and with best endeavour of making these judgments now in that period of uncertainty. And I also welcome the flexibility that you have indicated that we as an administration will continue to show to ensure that as circumstances change, our support will adjust as well. Colleagues, are the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. That concludes part 1. We now turn to part 2 and ask, please, that the link be broken. Thank you.